This is a book that I've been meaning to share with you for a while. It's Anthem for Doomed Youth by John Stallworthy, about 12 soldier poets of the First World War. Of course, there's actually a lot more than 12 soldier poets of the First World War, but this particular book was commissioned in association with the Imperial War Museum as a companion publication to their exhibition of the same name. The poets in question are Rupert Brooke, Charles Sorley, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, Edward Thomas, Isaac Rosenberg, Julian Grenfell, Francis Ledwidge, Robert Graves, Edmund Blunden, Ivor Gurney, and David Jones. Now, I've gone through the book and selected what bits of it I'm going to read to you, and I'm actually not going to read from every single poet. I'm just going to read some of my favorites. I actually went to see this exhibit, which, let's see what year it was. It was, this is printed in 2002, so that is probably when I went to see it. I was over in London at the time. It was at the Imperial War Museum. I had a strong interest in the poets of World War I ever since an English class I took on the topic of the knight in chivalry in literature. And one of the last things we covered in that class was the poets of World War I. One thing I want to say about this probably is that it's probably a bit of an odd topic for a video that's supposed to be relaxing, because some of the imagery conveyed in the poetry is, well, it's not really soothing. I will try and read most of it in a soothing voice, but if you're disturbed by the topic, you maybe want to take a look at one of my other videos. I just really felt a strong desire to share this with you regardless of that, so that's what I'm going to do. John Stallworthy, the author of this, is he's also, let's see, I believe he was the biographer for Wilfred Owen. He also edited the letters, Wilfred Owen's letters collection, and his poetry anthology. So he is very familiar with these poets. Let's see how far I get before a noise starts. Rupert Brooke. He's definitely one of the more famous poets from World War I, even though he never saw any action. He actually was killed en route by a mosquito. He basically died of blood poisoning or something like that. Not really the most sort of an ignoble way to go. Let me just read a little bit about Mr. Brooke, who is rather beloved in England as much for his good looks as for his poetry. Just under 6 feet tall, Brooke was strikingly handsome, with a mane of red gold hair. People would turn in the street to watch him pass. His physical presence was matched by a sharpness of intellect, a charm and vitality of manner that affected everyone he met. Popular and successful at Rugby, he was even more so at King's College, Cambridge, where he went as a scholar in 1906. He read more voraciously than ever. He threw himself into acting, playing the part of Mephistopheles in Marlowe's Dr. Faustus and the attendant spirit in Milton's Comus, and into the activities of the University Fabian Society, of which he became president. His circle of friends soon included Francis Cornford, E.M. Forster, Hugh Dalton, George Leigh Mallory, Geoffrey and Maynard Keynes, and Virginia Stephen, later to make her name as Virginia Woolf. When Henry James visited Cambridge in 1909, he too fell under the spell of the golden-haired young man who punted him down the Cam, although the pole was unfortunately allowed to fall on the master's bald head. Told that Rupert Brooke wrote poetry, but that it was no good, he replied, "Well, I must say I am relieved, for with that appearance, if he had also talent, it would be too unfair." I think some of the best writing coming from a lot of these poets isn't necessarily their poetry. They're also great letter writers. This one is from a letter to Kathleen Nesbitt. Brooke was commissioned into the Royal Naval Division and in mid-October 1914 took part in its brief and abortive expedition to Antwerp. This he described in a letter to Kathleen Nesbitt. The sky was lit by burning villages and houses, and after a bit we got to the land by the river, where the Belgians had let all the petrol out of the tanks and fired it. Rivers and seas of flame leaping up hundreds of feet, crowned by black smoke that covered the entire heavens. It lit up houses wrecked by shells, dead horses, demolished railway stations, engines that had been taken up with their lines and signals, and all twisted round and pulled out as a bad child spoils a toy. And there we joined the refugees with all their goods on barrows and carts, in a double line moving forwards, about 100 yards an hour, white and drawn and beyond emotion. The glare was like hell. We passed on out of that across a pontoon bridge built on boats. 2 German spies tried to blow it up while we were on it. They were caught and shot. We went on through the dark. The refugees and motor buses and transport and Belgian troops grew thicker. After about 1,000 years, it was dawn. Here's Rupert Brooke right here. This is where he basically finally had blood poisoning, and he died in April, and he was buried in on the island of Skyros. I do like this line. Had Brooke lived to experience the Gallipoli landings or the trenches of the Western Front, it is hard to imagine that the poet of dawn would not have written as realistically as Owen and Rosenberg. Like them, he is a soldier poet, but unlike them, he is not a war poet. He is a poet of peace and a celebrant of friendship, love, and laughter. The Soldier is probably one of his most well-known poems. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam. A body of England's, breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. And think, this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less, gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given. Her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter, learnt of friends and gentleness, in hearts at peace, under an English heaven. Next up is Julian Henry Francis Grenfell. Julian did everything and shone in them all. He rode and he hunted, and he read and he roared with laughter, and he cracked his whip in the quad all night. He bought greyhounds from the miller of Hambledon, boxed all the local champions, capped poetry with the most precious of the dons, and charmed everybody from the master of Balliol to the ostlers at the Randolph Hotel. And he was the best of friends and the dearest of men. The only things he couldn't stand were pose or affectation, and he could be a terror to the occasional aesthete still to be met with at Oxford. Yeah, of course, he was still privileged enough to be schooled at Oxford himself. Grenfell was in his element, writing home. I adore war. It's like a big picnic without the objectlessness of a picnic. I've never been so well or so happy. The fighting excitement revitalizes everything, every sight and word and action. One loves one's fellow man so much more when one is bent on killing him. Next up is Charles Hamilton Sorley. In his last year at Marlborough, Sorley won prizes for English and for public reading and a scholarship to Oxford. However, before going to university, he decided to spend some months in Mecklenburg acquiring German and independence. He acquired both. Out on a walk in February 1914, he heard a group of German soldiers singing something glorious and senseless about the fatherland. And when I got home, I felt I was a German, and proud to be a German. When the tempest of the singing was at its loudest, I felt that perhaps I could die for Deutschland, and I have never had an inkling of that feeling about England, and never shall. That emotion died with the cessation of the singing, but the affection and admiration he had acquired for the Germans continued after they became the enemy. He recognized, however, that he had to choose between the two countries, and seems to have had no hesitation in making his choice. No doubt in part because of his conflicting feelings about Germany, Sorley was critical of anything that smacked of jingoism. England, he writes, I am sick of the sound of the word. In training to fight for England, I am training to fight for that deliberate hypocrisy, that terrible middle-class sloth of outlook and appalling imaginative indolence that has marked us out from generation to generation. He was particularly critical of the jingoistic strain in Rupert Brooke's poetry. In a letter to his mother about Brooke's death in 1915 highlights the principal difference between them. That last sonnet sequence of his, of which you sent me the review in the Times Literary Supplement, and which has been so praised, I find, with the exception of that beginning, their hearts were woven of human joys and cares, which is not about himself, overpraised. He is far too obsessed with his own sacrifice, regarding the going to war of himself and others as a highly intense, remarkable, and sacrificial exploit, whereas it is merely the conduct demanded of him and others by the turn of circumstances, where the non-compliance with this demand would have made life intolerable. It was not that they gave up anything of that list he gives in one sonnet, but that the essence of these things had been endangered by circumstances over which he had no control, and he must fight to recapture them. He has clothed his attitude in fine words, but he has taken the sentimental attitude. This is a sonnet found in Sorley's kit after his death on the Western Front in October 1915. He was 20 years old at the time he wrote it. When you see millions of the mouthless dead across your dreams in pale battalions go, say not soft things as other men have said that you'll remember. For you need not so. Give them not praise. For deaf, how should they know it is not curses heaped on each gashed head? Nor tears. Their blind eyes see not your tears flow. Nor honor. It is easy to be dead. Say only this: they are dead. Then add thereto, yet many a better one has died before. Then, scanning all the o'ercrowded mass, should you perceive one face that you loved heretofore, it is a spook. None wears the face that you knew. Great death has made all his forevermore. This is Francis Edward Ledwidge. I think he's the only one in this book who is Irish, not British. War. Darkness and I are one, in wind and nagging thunder, brothers all. My mother was a storm. I call and shorten your way with speed to me. I am love and hate and the terrible mind of vicious gods, but more am I. I am the pride in the lover's eye. I am the epic of the sea. Siegfried Sassoon. He's one of the few people who made it out alive. Lived to be an old man. Sassoon became a victim himself at the beginning of April 1917. Invalided back to England, he arrived with a sniper's bullet in his chest and a view of the war very different from that which he left in 1914. On the lawns of Garsington Manor he met and mingled with Lady Ottilie Morrell's pacifist intellectual friends, such as Bertrand Russell and Henry Massingham, editor of The Nation. Influenced by them, and with courage equal to any he had shown in action, he made public a statement sent to his commanding officer. I am making this statement as an act of willful defiance of military authority, because I believe that the war is being deliberately prolonged by those who have the power to end it. I am a soldier, convinced that I am acting on behalf of soldiers. I believe that this war, upon which I entered as a war of defense and liberation, has now become a war of aggression and conquest. I believe that the purposes for which I and my fellow soldiers entered upon this war should have been so clearly stated as to have made it impossible to change them, and that had this been done, the objects which actuated us would now be attainable by negotiation. I have seen and endured the sufferings of the troops, and I can no longer be a party to prolong these sufferings for ends which I believe to be evil and unjust. I am not protesting against the conduct of the war, but against the political errors and insincerities for which the fighting men are being sacrificed. On behalf of those who are suffering now, I make this protest against the deception which is being practiced on them. Also, I believe that I may help to destroy the callous complacence with which the majority of those at home regard the continuance of agonies which they do not share and which they have not sufficient imagination to realize. His friend Robert Graves made urgent representations to the military authorities, as well as to certain influential civilians, that Sassoon should not be allowed to become a martyr to a hopeless cause in his present physical condition. The War Office was only too glad of an opportunity to hush matters up. If I were fierce and bald and short of breath, I'd live with scarlet majors at the base, and speed glum heroes up the line to death. You'd see me with my puffy, petulant face, guzzling and gulping in the best hotel, reading the roll of honor. Poor young chap, I'd say. I used to know his father well. Yes, we've lost heavily in this last scrap. And when the war is done, and you stone dead, I toddle safely home and die in bed. Good morning, the general said, when we met him last week on our way to the line. Now the soldiers he smiled at are most of 'em dead, and were cursing his staff for incompetent swine. He's a cheery old card, grunted Harry to Jack, as they slogged up to Arras with rifle and pack. But he did for them both by his plan of attack. There's Robert Von Rank Graves. I'm actually going to be jumping ahead a bit. Slowly. I like about this book. It actually has very nice, thick archival pages. To you who'd read my songs of war and only hear of blood and fame, I'll say you've heard it said before, war's hell, and if you doubt the same, today I found in Mammoth's Wood a certain cure for lust of blood, where, propped against a shattered trunk, in a great mess of things unclean, sat a dead Boche. He scowled and stunk with clothes and face a sodden green, big-bellied, spectacled, crop-haired, dribbling black blood from nose and beard. Now, Wilfred Owen. Owen's probably my favorite poet, but even more than his poetry, his letters are really amazing, and he wrote tons of them before he died. Most of them were written to his mother, but he also wrote letters to other poets, to other members of his family, particularly, I believe, his sister. And Siegfried Sassoon, he wrote him quite a bit as well. Once, after meeting him at Craiglockhart Hospital, where they were both invalided to. So here is one of the letters he sent to his mother. Commissioned into the Manchester Regiment, Owen crossed the Channel on the 30th of December 1916, and in the first days of January 1917 joined the 2nd Manchesters on the Somme near Beaumont Hamel. His letters to his mother tell their own story. I have not been at the front. I have been in front of it. I held an advanced post, that is, a dugout in the middle of no man's land. We had a march of 3 miles over shelled road, then nearly 3 along a flooded trench. After that we came up to where the trenches had been blown flat out and had to go over the top. It was, of course, dark, too dark, and the ground was not mud, not sloppy mud, but an octopus of sucking clay, 3, 4, and 5 feet deep, relieved only by craters full of water. Men have been known to drown in them. Many stuck in the mud and only got on by leaving their waders, equipment, and in some cases their clothes. High explosives were dropping all around us, and machine guns spluttered every few minutes, but it was so dark that even the German flares did not reveal us. 3/4 dead. I mean each of us 3/4 dead. We reached the dugout and relieved the wretches therein. I then had to go forth and find another dugout for a still more advanced post, where I left 18 bombers. I was responsible for other posts on the left, but there was a junior officer in charge. My dugout held 25 men tight packed. Water filled it to a depth of 1 or 2 feet, leaving, say, 4 feet of air. One entrance had been blown in and blocked. So far, the other remained. The Germans knew we were staying there and decided we shouldn't. Those 50 hours were the agony of my happy life. Every 10 minutes on Sunday afternoon seemed an hour. I nearly broke down and let myself drown in the water that was now slowly rising over my knees. Towards 6 o'clock, when, I suppose, you would be going to church, the shelling grew less intense and less accurate, so that I was mercifully helped to do my duty and crawl, wade, climb, and flounder over no man's land to visit my other post. It took me half an hour to move about 150 yards. I was chiefly annoyed by my own machine guns from behind. The sing, sing, sing of the bullets reminded me of Mary's canary. On the whole, I can support the canary better. In the platoon on my left, the sentries over the dugout were blown to nothing. One of these poor fellows was my first servant, whom I rejected. If I had kept him, he would have lived, for servants don't do sentry duty. I kept my own sentries halfway down the stairs during the more terrific bombardment. In spite of this, one lad was blown down, and I am afraid blinded. Anthem for Doomed Youth. This is probably one of his most famous poems, and of course it's the name of the exhibit at the museum, the name of the book as well. What passing bells for these who die as cattle, only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs. The shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmer of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers, the tenderness of patient minds. And each slow dusk, a drawing down of blinds. Futility. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once, at home, whispering of fields half sown. Always it woke him, even in France, until this morning in this snow. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir? Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? Sparse mists of moonlight hurt our eyes with gorged and scourged uncertainties of soul and soil and agonies. The darkness crumbles away. It is the same old druid time as ever. Only a live thing leaps my hand, a queer sardonic rat, as I pull the parapet's poppy to stick behind my ear. Droll rat, they would shoot you if they knew your cosmopolitan sympathies. Now you have touched this English hand, you will do the same to a German, soon no doubt, if it be your pleasure to cross the sleeping green between. It seems you inwardly grin as you pass, strong eyes, fine limbs, haughty athletes, less chance than you for life, bonds to the whims of murder, sprawled in the bowels of the earth, the torn fields of France. What do you see in our eyes at the shrieking iron and flame hurled through still heavens? What quaver, what heart aghast? Poppies whose roots are in man's veins drop and are ever dropping, but mine in my ear is safe, just a little white with the dust.